We all know that in order to get better at the trumpet, we need to spend time in the practice room practicing.
We talking about practice.
But is there a specific way that we should be practicing? And is there anything else that we should be doing in addition to practice to help us get better? Do we need to sleep 8 hours a night, or do we need to have a certain diet? In this video, we're going to cover 4 different habits that will make you a better trumpet player. Like with most things, having one of these habits is going to be better than having 0 of them. But if you can cultivate all 4 of these habits, I can guarantee that you are going to see big improvements in your playing over time. The first habit that we're gonna cover that will make you a better trumpet player is you need to be a musical scientist. What do I mean by this? I definitely don't mean that you need to go out and buy a white lab coat and wear it in the practice room. To explain what I mean, I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine named Jason Haheim. Jason is currently the principal timpanist with the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, which is a really big deal. According to a blog post he wrote, before he was in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, he was a senior scientist at a nanotechnology lab in Chicago. Shifting from being a scientist in a lab to being a timpanist in one of the best orchestras in the world is no easy feat. But according to Jason, he was able to do it through the power of what is called deliberate practice. Deliberate practice was coined by the late Anders Ericsson, who is a researcher who worked at Florida State University. He wanted to develop a way of thinking about how to practice and defining practice that would allow us to be able to engage with it and see rapid growth. He wrote a paper in 1994 where he began exploring the idea of deliberate practice, and later he wrote a book in 2016 called Peak, which showed all of the research that they've done and all of the power that deliberate practice holds. To save you from having to read those materials, we're just gonna look at Jason Haheim's definition of deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is the scientific method applied to music. Now hold on just a second. What in the world could the scientific method have to do with music? Well, to understand what he means, let's go ahead and take a look at the actual scientific method itself. In simple terms, what I learned and what you may have learned in grade school is the scientific method consists of 4 basic components. Number 1, you make an observation. Number 2, you form a hypothesis. Number 3, you make a prediction. And number 4, you experiment to test your hypothesis. The crux of the scientific method is data. Data is driving everything in your experiments. You do an experiment and then you see the result, and that result is data, and then you use that data to understand how you might do another experiment that could lead you closer to the result that you are seeking. To be a musical scientist in the practice room, you need to shift your thinking from, I need to test myself in the practice room and see how good I am, to, there are problems that I'm experiencing, let's find those problems, let's think of solutions, let's test those solutions so we can figure out what works and what doesn't. The beginning of this process may look like putting a piece of music on the stand, turning on a recording device, and recording a run-through of the piece itself. When you've done this, you can now begin the scientific method process. You're going to listen back and begin making observations. You're gonna think about what went well and also what didn't go well. When you're thinking about the things that didn't go well, you're gonna continue to make observations about why you maybe think it didn't go well, and then start making some predictions about what you could do next time to try to have a different and a more desirable result. Once you make those predictions, you now have a new plan that when you go through the piece of music a second time, you're going to try to implement those new plans, those new predictions. You're going to record it, you're going to listen back, and you're going to observe how those solutions worked. And if those solutions worked, you think, great, I now know what to do. If there are things that didn't work out the way you wanted them to, you begin to make new observations and new predictions, and you keep this process going until you find solutions to the problems you encounter. The opposite of this problem is just going through the motions in the practice room, playing something over and over and over and just crossing your fingers and hoping that it's going to get better. If that sounds like you in the practice room, you need to become a musical scientist. The second habit we're gonna cover in this video that will help you become a better trumpet player is to get organized. I'm sure this one does not come as a surprise to you. I mean, of course it's important to be organized, but how do we actually go about getting organized? To answer that question, let's go ahead and step in the gym together. When you enter into a gym like Planet Fitness or Gold's Gym or 24-Hour Fitness or anything like that, you're going to see a plethora of options in front of you. You'll see treadmills, you'll see barbells, you'll see free weights and other types of machines that will help you. There are all sorts of different things. And when you walk in there, you may feel overwhelmed and think, what should I do first? Well, that's the first step in getting organized. And the way you answer that is to ask, what are my goals? Is your goal to lose a little bit of weight? Is your goal to put on a little bit of muscle? Maybe your goal is to get stronger. Maybe your goal is to increase your cardiovascular health. The answer to that question, what is my goal, will begin the process of narrowing down the options towards ones that you feel will help you reach your particular goal. Let's say for this example, your goal is to build some muscle. The next question to ask is, what exercises should I do? The answer to that question is, it depends on what your goals are. Should you do legs today? Should you work out your upper body? Or maybe you should work out your abs or something like that. Whatever you want to be working out, that is going to dictate what you do. Maybe you want to do a leg day in the gym. So you begin to think, well, I'll do a leg day. Maybe I'll start with some squats. The next question might be, how much weight should I do? Or how many sets and reps should I do? If you're brand new to the gym, pretty much anything is going to allow you to see progress. But if you've got some experience under your belt, you're gonna need something more. This is where having a training program comes in really handy. It's really difficult to make decisions about how to progress in a vacuum. Most training programs are going to be designed to be completed over a couple of months. Each month has its own focus, and it starts with the weight that's lighter and you build up to weight that's heavier in a logical fashion so that you should be able to be successful in completing the reps with good form and all that kind of stuff. Having one of these programs in the gym just makes your time so much more efficient and effective. You know what exercises to do, how many reps, how many sets, all those types of things. You can get in there, get your work done, and get out. Hopefully, through that discussion, you begin to ask, how can I apply this to music making? To answer that, let's just follow those same exact steps we just covered to build a fundamental routine. To begin with, you're gonna ask yourself, what are my goals? Is your goal to build upper register or lower register? Do you need to expand your dynamic range? Do you need to build more consistency in your articulation? Or maybe your multiple tonguing is not quite where you want it to be. Whatever your goals are, write them down. These goals are going to serve as the funnel that is going to help you be able to choose exercises and ways to play them that are going to help you reach those goals. Next, you're going to choose some exercises from various method books that are going to target those skills that you want to develop. If you're unsure of what to do, you can ask your teacher, which you should definitely have, or I've got some videos that you can check out on my YouTube channel that might point you in the right direction. More on that later. When you choose the exercises that you want to play, next choose a tempo that you want to play them at. A good rule of thumb for me is that a tempo should be chosen that allows you to be successful 85% of the time or more. By successful, I just mean sounding the way you want to sound. It's going to be different for every exercise and it's going to be different for every person, but hopefully that helps give you a good place to start when choosing an appropriate starting tempo. It's definitely okay to make mistakes in your practice sessions, but too many mistakes might lead to bad playing habits. After that step, you're going to set some boundaries on how long you're going to play each exercise. I personally like to use repetitions. I like to set 1 or 2 or maybe 3 repetitions per exercise so that I have an idea of how much time I'm going to dedicate. If you don't want to do that, using something like actual just time, I'm going to practice this for 10 minutes, I'm going to practice this for 15 minutes, whatever you want to do, setting those boundaries will give you the final step to being able to have some version of a structured plan that's going to be tailored to you and your goals. If you're someone who feels like you're just going into the practice room, playing things at random, hoping you're going to get better, getting organized is going to help you maximize your time, and it will lead to a lot more fulfillment in your playing. The third habit that will make you a better trumpet player is to get focused. The brain is an amazing part of the human body, and one of my favorite parts about it is that it can actually change itself. It is programmed to be able to rewire itself based on proper stimulus. If you're not familiar with this term, it's called neuroplasticity, and it's how we learn and grow and change over the course of our life. Young children and adolescents' brains are changing all the time. They're designed to take everything in and transfer it and to make it make sense and to begin to rewire the brain. It's why when we talk about little kids, we say things like their brains are like sponges that can soak up information and retain it like crazy. As we age, the process of learning quickly continues, but it looks a little bit different. Understanding how the brain works and being able to take advantage of this process is crucial for being able to continue improving as we get older. You may not believe me about that, but that's okay. You don't have to take my word for it. This is Andrew Huberman. You may already be familiar with him, but if not, he is an associate professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford University School of Medicine. I didn't go to Stanford, so I didn't hear him there. I actually had to find out about him through his popular podcast, Huberman Lab. His podcast is a gold mine for anyone wanting to learn about skill development, sleep optimization, workout protocols, and many other topics. Players. Without focus, the gate to neuroplasticity remains closed. We may be able to see some short-term progress without deep focus in our practice, but the long-term rewiring of our brain, making new habits more automatic, will be much more difficult to achieve, and it's going to lead us to having the same kind of problems all throughout our life that just don't seem to get better. With a high level of alertness and specific points of focus, we ensure that our work in the practice room is effective. The neural patterns that we want to strengthen are lit up, and then when we go to sleep later that night, our brain begins to work on it, strengthening those neural pathways, weakening or removing other ones, and overall changing our brain completely to develop new habits. If your phone or friends or you have outside stress, if these things are causing you to lose focus in your practice sessions, it's important that you find ways to mitigate these distractions and deal with them so that you can get focused in the practice room and continue to see massive growth in your playing. The fourth habit we're gonna cover that will make you a better trumpet player is develop your mental representation. Earlier in the video, I mentioned Anders Ericsson, the man who coined deliberate practice. One of the fundamental components of being able to practice with deliberate practice is the development of the mental representation. Ericsson describes the mental representation as how an expert understands and interprets information, how they hold it in their memory, how they organize and analyze information, and how they ultimately make decisions with it. It's how a grandmaster in chess is able to see a whole bunch of different moves with the chess pieces on the board, but when I look at it, it just seems like a random smattering of pieces and I have no idea what's going on. Or in soccer, when you see the players running around, to me, it looks like they're just running around following the ball, but to someone who is knowledgeable or an expert in soccer, they're seeing the strategy behind it. They're seeing how different players are in their different places doing the things they're supposed to be doing. In music, one of the ways a mental representation could be understood is thinking about it as the sound we hear in our head. The sound you hear in your head is your ultimate guide for practicing. High-level professionals are able to listen to recordings, analyze them, figure out what's wrong, figure out solutions to it, and know how to implement those solutions because they know what sound they're going for. They know which things are problems and which things they don't have to work on. Less experienced musicians are going to find themselves doing a recording, listening back, and asking, is this right? That's because the sound in their head is not developed enough to know with specificity, are they on the right track? This is why we have teachers and other types of coaches to help give us guidance in those early years. The most effective way to develop your mental representation is through listening. Listening to other great players that you admire, and not just listening to them, but trying to figure out how are they doing what they're doing. For example, at the beginning of the pandemic, Håkan Hardenberger released weekly videos of him playing Charlier etudes. I'm very familiar with many of these Charlier etudes, so it was very cool to listen to him and to hear him make musical decisions that I just never would have been able to think of in a million years, and to begin to see that he is thinking more musically and more out of the box than I ever was at that point. But even more than his musicality, I became obsessed with his articulation. I loved the way his articulation had a nice ping at the front of it, and it sounded so easy, and there was this confidence he played with. Like he just expected the note he wanted to be there to come out when he wanted it to come out. I did not feel that way about my playing, so I began a search during the pandemic to figure out how do I get more of that kind of ping, ease, and confidence in my articulation. I did a lot of experimenting and talking to other people whose playing I admired, and over the course of time, I do feel like I got these qualities, or some of them, in my playing. In addition to that, not only did I figure it out, but through habit number 2 of being organized, I was able to set up systems that sort of in building block ways, one brick at a time, I was able to solidify this as the way that I articulate, so I don't have to think about it nearly as much anymore. It's just kind of the way that I play. As I mentioned earlier, for younger players, this process often happens with a teacher. You play something, your teacher models it for you, you try to copy that, and the teacher's giving you information to help deepen your understanding of how the trumpet works and how to be more musical. If you don't think you're getting that kind of value out of your lesson, or you don't have a teacher, it's important for you to prioritize developing your mental representation so that you can continue to grow and eventually have a deep understanding of how to be a compelling and committed musician. Swinging back to something earlier in the video, I mentioned that I have videos that will help you make good choices about what exercises to choose. I actually have a whole playlist of videos that you can choose from on the screen. Check that out now. I highly recommend the one titled How to Keep Your Air Forward. It's my explanation of how I developed that more crisp, clear, and easy articulation like Håkan. We'll see you in the next video.